Okay, Mr. Goodie Grammar, this is a lie detector test. Answer yes or no, and don't lie to me. Let's begin. Do you really work at General Grammar? Is your middle name Denise? Why do you talk about grammar so much? Isn't there Grammarly?
Yeah.
Do you say whoa a lot to attract mermaids?
I'm parched.
Well, Mr. Grammar, seems like you're living quite a complex life.
You're absolutely right. My life is pretty complex. And guess what? It's about to get more complex. But why? Ha! We're talking about complex sentences.
Would you like a gummy bear? Well, they're for truthers, not for liars.
Whoa! Talk about a crazy experience. Grammar goodies, my name is Mr. Goodie Grammar. Thanks so much for coming into General Grammar, where I provide you with all your English grammar needs. Although I don't know how I feel about today's product. In fact, it's made my life quite complex. Just joking. I thrive in chaos. So, let's jump straight into a Basketbreaker.
Uh-oh.
For this week's Basketbreaker, the question is, on average, how many diapers does a baby use in his or her first year of existence? What? After being born, how many diapers do they use in the first year? So, what did you come up with? Here's the answer. On average, a baby goes through over 2,000 diapers in just 1 year. Wow! I haven't seen that much waste since they made the last Airbender movie. You ruined my childhood. So, while I spiral into absolute misery, let's go ahead and drink up some radioactive waste.
3, 2, 1.
To start it off, let's go ahead and unpack our newest shipment today. Woo, what do you think it is? Had a couple of hints. Is it a spaceship? Is it a puppy? Or is it complex sentences? Yeah!
Oh my gosh!
But, whoa. Let's pause for a second, grammar goodies. In order to truly understand how we make up a complex sentence, we need to rewind and review something real quick. Specifically, what we need to review is dependent clauses. As a reminder, a dependent clause is a clause that has a subject and a verb, but it cannot stand on its own. Plus, it's usually started by a subordinating conjunction. What do you mean, Mr. Goodie Grammar? I got you covered. Here are some examples of dependent clauses. Keep in mind, these are not complete sentences right now. The first example of a dependent clause is, once I decided to actually listen. If you notice, this is an incomplete thought, and it starts with a subordinating conjunction, once. In our second example, we have, since he was very superficial. This makes up a dependent clause. But why? It has a subject, it has a verb, but it doesn't make complete sense on its own. Additionally, it has that subordinating conjunction, since, therefore making it a dependent clause. Finally, for example 3, we have, after my grandmother decided to morph into a dusty tortoise. And if you notice, it stops. It's like, well, after this, what occurred to the dusty tortoise grandmother? We don't know. Also, it starts with the subordinating conjunction after, therefore making all of this a dependent clause. Keep in mind, it's essential to know what dependent clauses are because they help make up complex sentences. However, what is a complex sentence, Mr. Goodie Grammar? Great question, English voice in my head. A complex sentence is one sentence that consists of one independent clause and one or more dependent clauses. The essential point to realize at its foundation is that a complex sentence has an independent and dependent clause. Okay, let's go ahead and take a dependent clause from before. We had, after my grandmother decided to morph into a dusty tortoise. Yes, that's dependent. But we know that we have to add an independent clause in order to make a complex sentence. So let's say we wanted to add, I decided to feed her lettuce. That is an independent clause. So let's go ahead and put those two together in order to form a complex sentence. It would go ahead and read like this. After my grandmother decided to morph into a dusty tortoise, I decided to feed her lettuce. It uses the formula of one dependent clause, then a comma to separate them, followed by that independent clause, and then boop, that period. Pretty cool, right? So let's go ahead and apply that knowledge in another example. Before, we had the dependent clause, once I decided to actually listen. It doesn't make sense on its own, and it starts with the subordinating conjunction, once, making it a dependent clause. But then let's say I have an independent clause that's, I had an epiphany that he is a lizard person. We know, of course, it's a subject, it has a verb, and it makes complete sense all by itself. So let's go ahead and marry these two together in order to form a complex sentence. So we would have this. Once I decided to actually listen, I had an epiphany that he is a lizard person. Please don't take over the world with your scales. So, as you can see, we put a dependent clause with an independent clause in order to form a complex sentence. I'll show you what I mean. Okay, for this variation of a complex sentence, let's go ahead and look at the formula. Remember, in the formula, DC represents dependent clause, and IDC doesn't mean I don't care, it means independent clause. So, for this complex sentence, we would have a dependent clause, followed by a comma, followed by one independent clause. So always break down the structure to see if you have all the elements of a complex sentence. Do you have that dependent clause? And do you have that independent clause? And today, punctuation is going to be especially important when composing this type of complex sentence. I'll get into that. So, when making this type of complex sentence, you need to go ahead and ingrain something in your brain. It's that a dependent clause that opens or starts the sentence is always set off by a comma. What I mean by that is that when you have a dependent clause that starts the sentence, that dependent clause goes all the way until a comma to separate it from the independent clause. This rule is applied no matter how short the dependent clause may be. Because if you do not use that comma to separate the dependent clause and the independent clause, then the whole sentence looks like a giant dependent clause. And no one wants an incomplete sentence. For example, let's go ahead and look at the punctuation in this sentence. While you were sleeping, the tooth fairy robbed your piggy bank. We have a dependent clause that starts the sentence. While you were sleeping. We know it's a dependent clause because it starts with the subordinating conjunction while. And that dependent clause from while goes all the way until that comma to kind of isolate it from the independent clause that follows it. So we can get this final sentence of while you were sleeping, comma, the tooth fairy robbed your piggy bank. If we didn't have that comma, the whole sentence would just come across as a dependent clause. Wait a second. Where's my tooth? And where's my money? Example. If you go to the party, I will be able to go too. Yeah. In this example, it starts with a dependent clause because that's the sentence structure we're focusing on, starting with the dependent clause. So we have the dependent clause, if you go to the party. It starts with the subordinating conjunction, if, and goes all the way to that comma that separates it from the independent clause, I'll be able to go too. So we get a complete complex sentence. Come on, guys. I want to go to the party too. Yeah, I hear the Kool-Aid man's going to be there, and I even bought red glasses. Wait, I can't go? All right. Guess it's an evening of Scrabble with my mother. Example. As long as there are no demonic beasts frolicking through the woods, I will go camping. In this example, we have the dependent clause, as long as there are no demonic beasts frolicking through the woods, comma, followed by that independent clause, I will go camping. Once again, we have all elements of a complex sentence. And that dependent clause does start with the subordinating conjunction, as. And hopefully the woods aren't full of demonic creatures frolicking about. Da 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 da. Oh! What's that noise? Father Mohican? Holy water? Something? Sage? Salt? Oh yeah, I used the salt on the burgers. Anyway, we still have a complex sentence. Yeah. Example. Because the leprechaun ran away with the gold, he was soon arrested for robbery. In this example, we start with a dependent clause. Because the leprechaun ran away with the gold. We know it's a dependent clause because it starts with the subordinating conjunction because and goes all the way until that, what? Comma. And it's followed by, the independent clause. He was soon arrested for robbery. Therefore, we have a complex sentence.
You'll never steal my gold.
How do you think you're doing so far with this? Not too difficult when you break it down. But I still think we need to go ahead and ask for some employee assistance.
We need some employee assistance.
For this section, I'm going to go ahead and challenge you to be creative. I'm going to give you one independent clause. From there, you need to go ahead and add a dependent clause to the front of that independent clause. Don't forget that comma in between them to go ahead and separate them. Let me go ahead and give you an example of what you are supposed to do. So, let's say I gave you this independent clause. The rabbit was late. What you'll do with that independent clause is add a dependent clause to the front of it and make sure to set it off with a comma. So, using my creativity, I can go ahead and add the dependent clause because of the horrible gardening incident, comma, the rabbit was late, in order to form a complex sentence. So again, you're just throwing a dependent clause to the front of an independent clause. Pretty easy, right? Keep in mind, when forming your dependent clauses, they usually start with subordinating conjunctions. Some subordinating conjunctions that you can use in order to form your dependent clauses are after, because, although, when, while, since, and once. These are just a couple of examples of subordinating conjunctions. But they start dependent clauses, so feel free to use them. Here's the independent clause that I want you to add a dependent clause to. The Amazon package arrived. What's inside? Go ahead and add a dependent clause to the front of that and set it off with a comma. Whoa! How'd you do and what did you come up with? Here's my example. While SpongeBob played his harmonica in jail, the Amazon package arrived. Whoa! And who ever thought that SpongeBob could play the harmonica? I started this complex sentence with the dependent clause while SpongeBob played his harmonica in jail. Wonder what he was arrested for. This dependent clause is started by the subordinating conjunction while and goes all the way to that comma. While SpongeBob was doing this occurred. So that subordinating conjunction helps create that relationship between the dependent clause and the independent clause. Here's the independent clause that I want you to add a dependent clause to. Walt Disney has a captivating life story. All right, add to it. Let me go ahead and give you my example. Due to his continued successes and failures, Walt Disney has a captivating life story. As you can see from this, I have the subordinating conjunction due to. And that builds on the relationship of my independent clause of Walt Disney has a captivating life story. Due to this, here is the result. And again, makes a complex sentence. Whoa! I want you to build off the independent clause, which is pretty dark. his business will crumble. Go ahead and add to it. Hopefully you put something cool. Let me show you my example. Unless Mario focuses on plumbing rather than defeating Bowser, his business will crumble. Gold coins are only valued in the Mushroom Kingdom, Mario. Come on. As you can see from this example, starts with the subordinating conjunction unless. And that dependent clause goes all the way to that comma, followed by the independent clause. Unless Mario does this, then this occurs. So we can see how that subordinating conjunction helps create the relationship between the dependent clause and the independent clause when making a complex sentence. Since I think you have it down pretty well, I'm going to go ahead and check you in the aisle. That's right, it's time for an aisle check.
Let's go.
For this week's aisle check, what I want you to do is go ahead and create your own original complex sentence that begins with a dependent clause. It could be about whatever you want it to be about. Just remember, when forming this type of complex sentence, you start with one dependent clause, set off by that comma, and it's followed by one independent clause. So feel free to use the formula in order to make this, perfect. What are you going to come up with? I bet it's going to be something, crazy. Have some fun. And while you do that, I think it's time that we start checking out.
Can't get enough general grammar? Make sure to sign up on www.mrgoodiegrammar.com to become a grammar goodie. There, you'll receive extended episodes, guided notes, worksheets, PowerPoints, quizzes, and so much more. Also, follow us doing Wednesday live streams on Facebook, random dances on TikTok, and handing out grammar challenges on Instagram. With all these resources, you can't help but have the best time learning about English grammar. Whoa!
So, what did you create? Here's my answer to this week's aisle check. When you're on the road, you feel free. As you can see in this example, I started the dependent clause with the subordinating conjunction when. And I went all the way to that little comma over there. Look at that little comma. I went all the way over there. And it was followed by that independent clause, you feel free. Yeah! So, in the end, I got my complex sentence. So, grammar goodies, if you did well and you have a beautiful sentence, go ahead and post that into the comment section below. We love to read it. If it makes us laugh and it's grammatically accurate, we'll go ahead and give you a shout out in an upcoming episode. And if you struggle with this concept, no sweat. Keep in mind, learning new concepts takes time and practice. And we're here to help you every step of the way. Well, grammar goodies, that's all for today. Come in next time where we're going to go ahead and learn how to flip a complex sentence to make it even, crazier. My name is Mr. Goodie Grammar. And, comma, in to general grammar anytime. Time to hit the road. Bye.